Welcome back to Therapists Uncut. My name is Alyssa Najera, and I am here with Nikki Young. And today we have three very special guests with us that you are going to learn so much about. They've written 2 books. They live in the Bay Area in California, and they were so kind enough to come visit us. So thank you so much for taking this drive out, and I'm going to let Nikki introduce them to you.
All right, we are incredibly excited. Here with us today, we have Signe Darpinian, a licensed marriage and family therapist, a certified eating disorder specialist, and host of Therapy Rocks. I said it like that because there's an exclamation point. So I don't know if that's how you hear it in your head when you say it. Okay. A personal growth podcast. So go check that one out. But she provides telehealth therapy services throughout the state of California as well. Then we also have Wendy Sterling here with us, a certified eating disorder registered dietitian and supervisor, a board-certified sports dietitian. I am super excited. That's very cool.
I know. Did anybody else's heart start beating faster? Yes, let's hear
A
more.
little excitement, yeah. She is consulted for here's more excitement. The Oakland Athletics, the Golden State Warriors. That's a hot name right now. New York Jets and New York Islanders. She is also co-author of How to Nourish Your Child Through an Eating Disorder and maintains a virtual private practice throughout the U.S. And last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Shelley Aggarwal, a physician and a board-certified pediatrician and adolescent medicine subspecialist. Dr. Shelley, okay. Can I call you Dr. Shelley? I like that.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Dr. Shelley has worked with premier academic institutions and continues as teaching faculty with Stanford Children's Health and UCSF Fresno. She is the medical director of clinics serving justice-involved youth. I'm intrigued by so many of these things. This is multiple podcasts.
And I'm going to jump in. I know Nikki has a question for you, but what is it? I always like to hear this. What is it like for each of you to hear your bios out loud?
That is an interesting question.
Right? Everybody always responds with the,
Wait, I'll go. I listened to it, I'm like, how did I talk them into doing this with me? The book's not this. right? I'm like, how did I even do that? Yeah. Anyway, I'm very proud.
So does that mean you kind of spearheaded this idea of the three of you?
Well, let's just say Signe's very persuasive. So, the three of us have been working together for years. We're all specialists in adolescence, in eating disorders, and shared many patients together over the years. And Signe kind of came to us individually and was kind of like, I have this idea, I want to write this book, and kind of got Shelley on board, then came to me, and I was writing another book, How to Nourish Your Child Through an Eating Disorder. So I said no.
One's enough.
Thank you.
I was like, she doesn't, those who may know her know that she's really persuasive and doesn't like when you say no. So here I am, 2 books all together later. But we started writing together in 2017. And really, since we treat eating disorders, which utilizes a multidisciplinary lens, we really love the idea of a preventative book for teens using that same lens. So Signe is an adolescent therapist, Dr. Aggarwal is an adolescent medicine doc, and I'm a dietitian. And so we wrote No Way, that first book, really as a preventative guide for teens, and we infused all kinds of topics to help navigate adolescence, that lovely, tumultuous time of life. Which
for those of you listening and not watching, I'm being Vanna White here with the book. Go ahead.
Yep. And we talk about stress and puberty and managing emotions, how to navigate hunger levels, managing hunger and satiety using a really cool tool called the Hunger Meter, and all using a non-diet approach, which we love. We talk about exercise, we talk about sleep. And then what was happening was that, a lot of parents were reading the book alongside of their teen and maybe pre-screening the book, like, is this something I want my kids to really read? And basically coming back to us and saying, where was this book when I was a kid? Do you have one of these for me? And so eventually the publisher came to us and said, would you write this book for parents?
Okay.
Yeah, and so...
And did you say no initially?
She likes to start there.
Yes. I was like, oh, crap.
Oh, my God,
There we go again.
But I will will say, when we wrote No Way, we always envisioned writing a parent book because we knew that we wanted something for the teen and then really something for the parents as a guide, as a preventative guide. Raising Body Positive Teens has a couple extra things that No Way didn't have. We have a diet-free parenting chapter. We have a chapter on social media. We have a lot about the culture and food, which we will talk more about, I'm sure. We have what else? Oh, Signe's favorite.
She's not gonna let that one go. Make sure you drop in the boundaries.
Like the boundaries that you blew through to get those.
Very
Just checking.
Sometimes the boundaries can be too rigid. Sometimes boundaries can be used to be selfish.
See what happens when you deal with a therapist, right?
But at the end of the day, we all love boundaries, guys.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So we do have boundaries. We have a lot of kind of extras that weren't in No Way. And we're really proud of both. And as you can see, the writing dynamic was so fun.
That's what I was gonna.
So much fun writing together.
I can imagine, yes, because it's just
I'm the quiet one.
Shelley's like, this is fun.
These are like ping pong balls going back and forth, and I just wait.
So it's not by chance that you sat between the two of them. Okay.
Right. This is just a normal dynamic, guys.
And tell them about our system that we had
Oh yeah.
in our Google Doc.
Well, so the system was primarily designed for Signe by Wendy and I out of necessity, which is basically 2-to-1 outvotes.
2-to-1. So if you have a really good joke,
or not,
and
or
there
not
are a couple people
Or
that
not.
don't see how good it is, then you're out.
You
so
know,
if it's too, it's like there's
do you
no
have an
question.
example? I would really like. I am known as the person with the really bad dad jokes.
Yes, I have so many examples.
Let's hear one.
It's sort of like, you know how what is it called at the end of a movie, the cuts that didn't make it? The
Outtakes.
outtakes. Outtakes.
Okay,
yes.
let's hear it.
Maybe that's an idea. Let's see. What's an example of an
80s rock,
outtake?
80s music references repeatedly in the book.
Well,
that
they're
you were
repeatedly, but I snuck them in.
Success, everybody.
Hungry like a wolf. I made it in. Right?
I saw that.
Sugar is not poison. That's an 80s band. Made it in. That was allowed.
Okay. So what percentage of them made him in?
About 10%.
Yeah. And then when they make it in, she's like, "You're letting me keep it."
Oh,
It's the greatest gift ever that you gave her.
So our exercise chapter is called The Young and the Restless, right? And I think Signe was like, our publisher, they're based in London. Do you think they don't know that that's like a soap opera?
We weren't going to tell them until it was done. Like, I just want to make sure you know this now that it's here.
Now that it's published and sitting on our table.
Well, I love to hear how much fun you guys had writing this book, because for so many of our listeners, maybe writing a book is something that's in your mindset one day, maybe. And then here you guys are. Like, you did
other
it
side.
twice, 3 times, right?
3 times for Wendy.
And it's so doable. So not
Wendy's
only
on her 4th also.
Oh my God, you're still going? Why stop now, Wendy? Why stop?
Well, I say it's like having kids. After this point, honestly, I'm done. I will have nothing left to say, I promise. But similar to these two, the How to Nourish Your Child Through an Eating Disorder was written for parents. And that book, we also knew when we wrote it that we wanted to write it for the patient themselves too. So they both kind of had a partner. And really, once that's done, I promise, there's nothing else I know. Nothing else.
She says until book 5.
That's right. Yeah. So we'll call you back in 3 years for book 5 and see what that's on.
There's nothing left in my brain.
And then just for our listeners, we will absolutely make sure to link to all of these resources and books in our show notes too. So if many people have honestly probably read these already, but for those that haven't, we will point you in the right direction because they're fantastic resources. So
Thank you.
I totally just took that vibe down when I said that. We had so much energy going, and then I just...
Well, we're going to bring it back because we told you guys we like the squirrel on this. All right, we'll bring it back a little bit. All right, so you gave us an intro of what some of the books are about. Sounds like Signe's favorite topic is the boundaries. Social media definitely caught my attention. Yeah. And stress is one of the topics as well in both of the books, right? So tell us about how stress showed up in this book and in what way.
So that's a really interesting question in reference to how do you think about stress when you think about food and body, right? Or food.
Yes.
And how do we take that concept, that very real experience that we all have, and incorporate it in to the content of this book that was teen friendly and then also parent friendly. And so backing up, what is stress? Stress is a survival response. It's a survival instinct, right? And it's basically, what is the mind and the body going to do to help you deal with the situation that in one way or another is being perceived as a threat? And so there's going to be certainly thoughts that come about because of that, but then there's also going to be very physical responses that we have. And if you think about it, so you have to give a presentation. You know, public speaking is a common fear. You've probably heard or experienced your hands start shaking, your cheeks get flushed, right? This is a very biochemical response, that among others, that your body is responding to a perceived threat and trying to do compensatory things in your system so that you can deal with it. So traditionally, you think about the tiger being chased, right? That's what we think about, we learn about, that survival response and stress. In the modern world, that is deadlines, that's school, that's, the variety of different pressures that we deal with on a day-to-day basis.
I'm finding myself taking a deep breath as you're talking. Can everybody just breathe as you listen?
She thinks about all of her impending deadlines. And
Yes, in the modern world, it's everywhere.
Well, and so that's a great thing you just said right now, because you're holding your breath as a response to stress and all of the things that you need to deal with. And if you think about what is the impact that's going to have on your system, a lot of our nervous system lives in our GI tract. People don't realize that. And so
is it true that that is the area of your body with the second
brain?
Okay.
Right? That's how people reference it as your second brain.
Most concentrated area of nerve endings, correct?
Yes, exactly right. And so for people to have gastrointestinal symptoms related to stress is very common. Low appetite, right? I'm not hungry, I don't want to eat. Or an increase in appetite as a compensatory sort of like, trying to kind of handle that stress. How many times have we heard of people vomiting when they have to give a presentation, or like you hear about even like celebrities and performers, I throw up right before I go on stage, right? In terms of that can be something, another way in which stress shows up for people in their body. And so there are very biochemical ways in which our system is impacted that affects how we ingest food and how we eat, right? And how it is that we may eat in one way or another based on what we're experiencing, and not just because we think about eating that way, but also because physically we're having an experience that may compel us to eat or not eat in a certain way. And one of the things that we highlight is, then how do you manage that? And there's lots of tools and techniques and reflective exercises to help people understand, how do I experience stress? Because it's unique to us all, right? The way in which you experience stress or you experience stress is going to be different than how I experience it. I might get a headache, whereas you might have, more of that handshaking or something like that. So how do I understand not only how I'm experiencing stress, but then also how I manage that stress for myself? And that may involve the deep breathing, that may involve talking to a trusted person in our lives, that may involve talking
like
to
ourselves,
a therapist.
like talk to myself.
The most important relationship we have.
Right.
Should have seen her right before the podcast.
There was a whole pre-routine.
So Signe talks to herself before, any kind of interview type situation. I'm guessing Alyssa dances.
I do dance. That's my stress reliever.
And that's a great example. That's wonderful.
That's so good.
So we tried to bring in, first of all, kind of explain that in a way that was accessible to youth and also to parents, but then also encourage that self-reflective work to help yourself manage it, whether it's individually or through recruiting help.
And that, I think that's so important, because how many people have heard, I stress eat, or they know that they lack an appetite when they're overwhelmed or stressed, but does the large majority of the population have an understanding of why that is? And I'm going to guess not. So I'm curious of how many responses there were as people were driving to work listening to this.
I keep looking at this as you're talking, so I'm like, what a great time for this to come out post-COVID, when so many of us were stress eating through COVID, right? Because we were so isolated and we couldn't leave, or we could with some restrictions. And I'm so excited you guys were able to write this book, and come here and share your knowledge. Eating disorders and food, it's not one of our specialties, so it's definitely not something that we've talked about before, but the wealth of knowledge and experience and expertise between the three of you is so valuable to our listeners.
And I love how it's just comes together, right? You have 3 different perspectives from 3 different
personalities
for sure. Yes. You have an awesome dynamic.
Yes.
And then also just your different areas of expertise and training. I love the way it all just comes together.
Yeah, it feels so much better with all of our different scopes, you know?
And I'm sure part of that is necessary when you're working with eating disorders. And like Alyssa said, that is definitely not one of my areas of specialties, but my understanding of eating disorder programs is they are so multidisciplinary, right? You can't just work with an eating disorder as a therapist or as a physician. It's so much more effective when you have the full team.
And for our listeners, can you explain what that means when you say multidisciplinary and why the 3 of you are a part of this team or even more people?
So like what role would a nutritionist play in, a teen presents to somebody's office, whether they see you first, Signe, or whether they're in a PCP's office. When this first comes to light, like what role does a nutritionist play in eating disorder treatment?
Yeah, so a dietitian on the eating disorder team is really going to help with getting the eating behaviors back online. Okay. That's really going to be primarily helping to get the energy balance back. So usually there's a mismatch in energy needs. Somebody's not eating enough to fuel their exercise or energy needs, even if they're not exercising. And that really creates a whole host of medical complications, which can show up in terms of low heart rate or GI complications, dizziness, fatigue, issues in sports performance. We see it affecting hormone levels such as estrogen and testosterone levels, which then affect bones. So we see a whole host of, things and complications simply just from not eating enough. My job is to help them to eat more, and so literally trying to increase the volume of food so that it is adequate, balanced, and that they are eating consistently. So are they eating enough? Are all nutrients present? And then are they actually doing that always, like throughout the day, and then 7 days a week? And then, with eating disorders, if that's the question, there may also be kind of long periods of time during which someone is trying to eat a meal. So a meal may take hours, and so we're trying to kind of help get meals to be in more discrete time periods. And, we're also looking at how are they feeling about all foods? Are they sorting foods into good foods, bad foods? And then are they therefore unable to eat at a friend's house or go to a restaurant or have a snack at school because they can't eat the snack at school because they're too anxious when it's presented to them in 4th period. So really trying to build exposure to all foods. And so sometimes that is a little bit more methodical. Today, we are going to go to the bagel store and have a bagel. And that may escalate anxiety in the beginning.
Some exposure there.
Exactly, yep. But then the next time, that anxious response might be slightly more reduced and then further reduced and then further reduced until over time they're a little bit more comfortable in the presence of whatever food creates more fear. So that's what my work would look like with them, increasing volume, reducing food fears, helping to close that energy gap.
From my perspective as the outpatient therapist, when the family might show up to me first, could show up to the primary care physician, but a lot of times it would be me first. And it's interesting to note that what we see trending lately, and we've been treating eating disorders for over 20 years now, dieting used to be a lot more straightforward. So it'd be like, my daughter is on Jenny Craig and it didn't go well. Oh, okay, that seems like a bad idea, but come on in. Now what we're seeing is when families come to us, which means, of course, there's already a problem, what we're hearing more often than anything else, as wellness culture seeps into diet culture and vice versa, is I just thought that they wanted to eat healthier and exercise more. And so parents on one hand are a lot more well-informed about eating disorders, and they kind of know these catchphrases, body positivity, eating intuitively, non-diet approaches. But it's sneaky. And of course, parents are in this culture as well. So they might not be so aware or awake about their own relationship to their food and maybe immersed in diet culture themselves.
Unintentionally or intentionally, the ones sending that message to kiddos.
Sure, exactly. And so by the time they get into session with me, depending on what the eating disorder is, say it's anorexia, an individual is underweight as a result, underweight for them. In reference to their history of weight. So they come in, the kid is malnourished. Therapy with eating disorders is kind of interesting because the work goes sort of outside in. So you don't address the reasons why the eating disorder is there. So you don't address she had low self-esteem. It's like you have to first figure out what is the alligator closest to the boat. And it is weight restoration, it is health restoration, and food is medicine first. So when we think about it from a therapist perspective, I can't do cognitive behavioral therapy. I can't, improve somebody's body image when they're not thinking clearly because they're malnourished.
Yeah, if they don't have enough nutrients to
So if
function.
they have the internal vulnerability of under-eating and maybe something like undersleep, because sleep gets interrupted as well, I have nowhere to go. And so all of the focus in that phase one of the work is weight and health restoration as a hopefully very temporary first phase.
Makes sense. And then Dr. Shelley, as I've dubbed you, sorry. That's just how I'm. Every doctor in my life that is a family friend, whatever, I call them Doctor first name. It's just, I don't know, just rolls off the tongue.
I like
for
it.
Me. So do you oversee kind of all of these processes from a health and medical perspective?
Yes, in the sense of medical complications related to disordered eating or eating disorders is something that the physician would be working with in a collaborative way with the multidisciplinary team.
Okay.
So the basic point around that is disordered eating will lead to medical issues, and that is something that needs to be addressed depending on where the person is. Okay. So we don't want them to get to this point. We don't want them to have an eating disorder at all. But assuming that it is going on, we definitely want to make sure that we're assessing and intervening at a point that is firstly keeping them safe and certainly preventing, somebody from getting into the more serious complications, and those complications can get life-threatening. And so the role of the physician in that is going to be to assess the medical picture, right? And then also have a wide lens in reference to all of the pieces that Signe and Wendy are talking about, being informed, being educated, and being able to understand those full needs.
That was such a beautiful answer. Thank you, guys, because it helps our listeners and it helps us understand the collaborative approach to treating this. And for some of us, we don't even know there's such a collaboration happening behind the scenes, right? I'm looking at Wendy because I want to go back to all of the key topics that you were like, the book touches on this, this, and this. And we talked a little bit about social media, and I would love to wrap back around to social media. Signe mentioned, parents are even immersed in this world, and so sometimes it's very hard to, I don't remember what alliteration you used, but it started with an A. It was hard for them to be awakened to or aware of.
Awake and aware.
Yes. So can you guys talk more about social media and what kind of role that might play in the patients that you work with or in the culture of food and diet?
We love our social media chapter. And as Wendy mentioned, it is a new chapter. We did not have that chapter in the teen book. And we have a lot of techniques that we like a lot. But one of them that I really like is helping our teens become critical viewers of the media. Yes. And the place that that's coming from is it's just not realistic to keep them from the destructive messages in the culture, from their friends, on social media. That's not realistic, but what we can do is help them become critical viewers of the media, which helps build resilience within them and us, by the way. And one of the ways
y'all listening.
Exclamation point.
And Signe likes her exclamation point. I'm learning this.
And so my daughter, I have a 12-year-old daughter, and one of the ways that we like to do that is right in the comfort of our own home through the TV shows and the movies that we watch.
Because there's so many opportunities to do that.
There's so many opportunities. Pop culture is full of them, unfortunately. And so one way that we might do that is right now, we're a little bit in between shows. We just finished Heartstopper. We need a new show. We're watching reruns of New Girl.
Okay.
Which we like a lot, but I do not like some of the fat phobic messaging. So one thing that we might do is point out fat phobia or point out diet culture when we see it. And so right now they're flashing back every so often to Schmidt, one of the characters in the show, in a fat suit. And so what I might say is, I don't like when they make fun of Schmidt in a fat suit. There's nothing wrong with being fat. And what's really cool is over time, you'll start to notice that they do it on their own. Yes. So in the beginning of COVID, we've been doing it for a while too. My daughter, we were watching Iron Man for the first time. I don't know how that happened. It's great. But there is a scene in either number 1 or 2 where there are all of these women on stage and they're all the same size. And I didn't say anything. And my daughter's like, wait, what's up? There is no size diversity.
That
they're
is
all
amazing.
The same.
Oh, proud
They're all
mama
the same
moment.
size. What's happening? And so they get to the point where they can really point it out themselves. And, we'll do things like right now we're watching Lizzo's new reality show, Watch Out for the Big Girls. And we're actually going to Lizzo's concert in November.
That sounds exciting.
So it's a good way to...
You should take Alyssa.
So exciting.
Yeah, but it's like it gives you so many great opportunities to discuss body image that we define in the book as an inner picture we all have of our body, in addition to the way that we feel about it. And of course, the shows and our media have a big impact on that image.
And so much of it, well, a lot of it's blatant, right? But so much of it is subliminal. So I feel as though identifying what you're seeing helps to prevent that subtle messaging. And as you're talking, I had a total, so I'm looking at my wife Stacey off camera here because the other day we were watching with our kids a movie, and the messaging around a young child or an adolescent rather with their first menstrual period was horrendous. And she did exactly what you're describing. Didn't just laying back, just casually said, I really don't like the way this is being portrayed, and reflected on maybe a more positive message. And it cracks me up because same thing. One of the kids later in the movie said, I don't remember exactly what she said, but she reflected back that she also was observing that.
Was it your youngest by any chance?
How did you know?
You guys will learn a lot about these children.
They have personalities.
Who's the youngest?
Similar experience?
Yes, they're always the more feisty.
Yeah. If we were to compare, I'm guessing she would be the Signe of the group, which is the lots of exclamation points in her life.
Right.
Yeah, but it takes the air out of it. And I one more thing about it is that although there is a lot that is lacking in our media and our shows and our TV, I also notice that things are getting better each year. Yeah. I'm seeing a whole lot of diversity in every way, and that's fun. It's not where it needs to be.
Exactly, but it's cool to see the progress.
It is.
Absolutely.
It is.
We wrote the social media chapter. It was like all that stuff on Facebook and Twitter and TikTok. All of that was kind of going on in the backdrop. Mm-hmm. One other thing that we tell parents is, who are your kids following and why? What's going on in their social media? Like, get a tour of your kids' social media and figure that out. And if your kid's following people and they're going on their social media and they feel really bummed out after looking at certain images, well, hey, click on follow, because if they're not inspiring you, then maybe it's time for that person not to be someone that you're seeing in your feed on a regular basis. Right?
Love that.
We also like the idea of having diversification in your media feed. And so not just like thin bodies and food all the time, like, hey, get some art, get some cooking, get some, hobbies. What else could we have in that feed as well? And so, and then if there are these, we get things that come to us of like, well, this bodybuilder said I should be doing this, and this, health expert said, and it's like, well, what makes this person a health expert? Are they credentialed? Where do they go to school?
TikTok.
Everybody's an expert on social media.
And so sometimes too, talking with the teen, and we coach parents on how to have these conversations with their kids about these influencers. Influencers can be really seductive because they get in and they talk with their followers and they go into the comments and they're, you think you know them and they think and so they attract a huge following, but really at the end of the day, they aren't actually experts per se in their
And not to
subject.
mention the fake and scripted nature of all of it too. And I don't know the account, but I saw an advertisement for this account where it was a girl on the thinner side who was taking 2 photos, and in one she was posing in a way that made her body look very slim in certain areas and such, and then same exact individual, same exact person took the same photo without all of this intentional posing to relay that people don't look like that in normal life. These are tricks. I mean, look at all the lights, right? It's the lighting. It's all of these factors that make it fake. It's not real life.
Right.
And I thought that was cool to put awareness to that. And it was somebody that was gaining some traction in their following, but just putting different messages.
Yeah, and like Signe said, there's a lot of room for improvement, but there's actually some growth, which is really cool to follow.
It's fun to see.
Absolutely, especially from your guys' perspective, because you said 20 years you've been doing this work.
Yeah.
Man, that's a long time, time. And the trends are changing now, right? You mentioned the trends around dieting is now not so explicit. It's just kind of like subtly worked in there. And for Wendy, this question is for you. What kind of myths or additional maybe misconceptions or even social media myths are what's the word I'm looking for? Perpetuated, through media?
Oh, you hear lots of things. I mean, I think diet culture makes people think that there is one right way to do everything, one right way to eat, and one right way to move. And anything out of that box is wrong. And so, anything could be a big myth, that is out there. I mean, I think one I love is celery juice. You hear lots.
Why? Tell me about celery juice.
You just hear celery juice is the end all be all, cure all for everything under the sun, every element.
It's like Windex from my big wedding.
Right? I don't know. I hear that one all the time. Celery juice, it cures everything. I don't know. So that one, when you said social media, that one like immediately came to mind because that one just.
I mean, it floods my feed. That's why I'm like, please tell me about the celery juice.
I'm really glad because I cannot stand celery. Yeah. So I'm glad to hear that I'm not.
You're not missing out?
I'm not missing out on some elixir of.
And I think too, hydration is important, and I do think with the world of the masks, many of my patients were actually not hydrating well. But this idea of like people walking around with a water bottle and like pounding water, like you don't have to overhydrate. And in fact, overhydrating can be dangerous. But I think that's another kind of wellness thing that has been kind of perpetuated about just pounding water, So I want to be a little careful with that because I think in the world of masks, many of my patients are not hydrating enough.
It makes total sense just because there's a tiny little film barrier that prevents just a natural.
Yeah. So, but I think this idea of like always hydrate, and I think that more importantly is there's many different ways of eating and feeding and nourishing yourself. And at the end of the day, the most important thing is that people are eating regularly and having food that makes them feel good, that they're happy about, that, that they're, not getting hypoglycemic and missing meals, going for long periods of time without eating.
It's just amazing how many myths and stories we create in our heads about food, and your book talks about like the morality, right? Like good versus bad, and it's
I want to hear you guys answer that a little bit because that is just so pervasive, right? The right way, the bad food. Tell me, I want to hear your reactions. Bad food.
I'll start.
I see it written all over you, Shelley.
Well, and so to that point of Dr. Shelley, and how do we do in medicine about framing these conversations and promoting these ideas of good and bad, right? And good and bad bodies and good and bad food and basically what people should be eating and what they shouldn't be eating and how that adds to that culture or that idea of morality of food, right? So that is one thing where we have to, and Signe says this wonderful thing, making foods equal in availability and in morality. So food is food. You are allowed to eat and enjoy everything. This is what I say to patients. You are allowed to eat and enjoy everything. And the looks that I get back at me, like, what? Never heard that.
Are you sure you know what you're doing?
I can have Cheetos? Yeah, you can. It's okay. The point is meeting your needs. And the point of that is being able to identify your needs, right? And so that is what we're going after, because those are the things that are sustained. It's not about labeling something good or labeling something bad in reference to food or to body, just removing that. Mm-hmm. So we just had this conversation, and a request that we make is toss the terminology junk food out of your vocabulary.
Oh, that's good.
Just toss it out. Just stop using it, right? Just stop using this idea of junk food when you're describing anything, because that is putting a value on it. That is creating, this is junk. This is worthless. This is something bad. So let's just stop using that terminology. Food is just food. How we're engaging with it, what are the behaviors that we're practicing around food, that is what we need to go after. And those are the things we need to work on.
I'm like silence right now. Like, oh, that was genius. Right? Remove the word junk food, and something that I've never even considered. But you're right. We immediately give it value, and then we tell our kids that, and then we send all these messages to our kids because we're so good at sending them mixed messages sometimes. But thank you. I cut you off. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No,
Nikki.
I'm filing that one away because I will own. I'm sure I use that word casually.
We all have. I have too.
Yes.
I have. Yeah.
Yes.
All right,
Shelley,
gone.
I have one more question
Stacey,
for you.
if I say it. Okay, it's gone.
For those of you who watch us regularly, you know that we're not very scripted, but I have a very specific question, so I'm going to read this one, so bear with me.
I'm intrigued. What are we? Okay.
So in episode 27 of Therapy Rocks! Exclamation point, which is
Therapy
this
Rocks!
podcast,
There you go.
Shelley makes this statement, quote, "Food isn't just something we ingest. It's at many moments at the heart of the human experience, and certainly even human connection." End quote. Can you share with our listeners what that statement means to you?
So that statement was linked to a story that was related to an experience that I had when I was in third grade. And that experience was about my favorite teacher, Mr. Stanley, who is just near and dear to my heart. Basically, because I come from a vegetarian, Southeast Asian, that's my heritage, household, I didn't eat lunch at school, and just in terms of what was available. I didn't bring lunch, although my mom did pack lunch. I didn't bring lunch because it was Indian food. And at that time, even now, I'm sure for a lot of kids, but especially when I was growing up, that was so foreign. And so it was just like, the weird food that this weird kid who's not from this culture is bringing. The smells, the flavors, everything was different. And so I would throw it away. And after a while, my mom was like, "I'm not packing it for you if you're going to throw it away. We're not wasting good food." So I would wait until I got home to eat. So oftentimes I was playing during the lunch period. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Stanley must have seen this. And so one afternoon after this, he called me up to his desk, and I described this in the podcast talking to Signe. Basically, I walked up, and I'll never forget it. He was sitting at his desk. He was writing with his right hand. He never looked up at me. I walked up to his left side, and he slowly pushed a Snickers bar towards me. I don't know why this makes me cry every time. But he pushed a Snickers bar towards me, and he said to me, "I know you haven't eaten today." And that moment, it's just such a touching, significant moment of two people, of two people connecting, and this wonderful human being looking at this little kid who was so different, or who felt very different, and recognizing that I hadn't eaten and wanting to feed me something. And just the way in which he connected with me in that moment, and what it taught me about people meeting each other, where they need to be met, and how it is that food is part of those moments, in reference to, we think about celebration in our own families, or not even celebration, even in grief, things of that sort, right? Food is such an essential part of that. It's not just something that we ingest. It fundamentally shapes our experience of life, and how we offer it or don't offer it to each other can really be impactful. And so I guess that's part of what I meant by that.
Can I
love that.
one piece in?
Yes.
Are you going to tell them
Yeah, I gotta finish the rest.
Ooh, are you going to tell us
There's
what?
more.
So at the time that we recorded the podcast with Signe, we had not found Mr. Stanley.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, I think I love where this is going.
So, sorry. We found him. I found him. I talked to him about 2 weeks ago, and he said that he had been thinking about me, and I had gone back when I was in medical school. This was decades ago now, and he said he so regretted not getting my phone number, and that over the years he had thought about me, and then the week before he knew I was trying to get in touch with him, he actually had pulled out our class photo and was thinking about me and had it in front of him when I called him back. And he said, I'm looking at you right now.
Oh my gosh.
I think I got goosebumps.
Yeah. So obviously he and I we share, at least from my perspective, a deep connection. And he's just such a extraordinary, lovely man, and I'm so happy that we were able to reconnect. And you said just sometimes you don't know in terms of how certain experiences will evolve over time.
Yeah.
He sounds like a beautiful
powerful.
human.
Well, and I haven't even gotten into just all the things he taught us, right? And all the ways in which he fundamentally influenced how I thought about certain things. So,
And for all the teachers out there listening, this is the impact that you have on your students.
Yeah.
I love his note to you, too. He's like, I had no idea how much of an impact I had.
yes,
That's
right.
beautiful.
That's right. That's exactly what he said.
Man, that was fantastic. I don't think I even want to ask any more questions because I just like that. I like ending on that vibe. Because it hits on everything we've been talking about and it really just makes the point that you never know what kind of impact you're having. And that's what we're here to do is make an impact and make all of these topics, in this case, I was about to say healthy eating. Well, okay, so throwing those terms off the table, how do you refer to eating behaviors in trying to create healthy habits? What terminology would you use when you're talking about it?
Okay, so many different routes you could go. So like Shelley said, the goal is to take the morality out of food, and Wendy also talks about a cool topic, taking the morality out of movement as well. But with the food, what's tricky is that when you have these off-limits foods and good and bad and certain foods you don't trust yourself around, you're not allowed to have, of course, like forbidden fruit is the sweetest, right? And what it does is it gets you thinking about food from the chin up and like what I should eat and what I shouldn't eat and how I should get rid of my food, instead of eating in a more embodied way, deciding from the inside when you have appetite or not, no big deal. But let's say that the hunger meter that Wendy talked about, it's 1 to 10. On the low end is the hungry end. So a 3 would be eating to appetite. And ideally at that time you would tune in and decide from the inside, what do you want to eat? We use something that's kind of fun for kids, but it's fun for us too. What taste, texture, temperature do I want this go around? You decide what that is. And what's cool is if you can get pretty close to what it is that you're craving, which you can only do if you don't have off-limits foods. If you have off-limits, so if broccoli equals ice cream, which is not mine, I heard this back when and I've always loved it. If broccoli equals ice cream, your body can then crave what it needs versus what you're not letting it have, right? Yeah. So you do your best to grab the food that you're craving and maybe that matches what you're going to be up to next. And the goal would be able to stop it just enough, whatever that is for you. That's very personal. So that's the satiety or the fullness end of the hunger meter. So maybe at lunch, we want to stop at a 6, which is room for more, comfortable stopping place, because we want to be more energized. But maybe later on, we're going out to dinner and we want to feel more anchored by our food. But what's cool about the stopping place is that it has to do with where you start. The hungrier you get, of course, the more you're going to overcorrect. But it also has to do, so ideally you would start with that manageable hunger, the 3, but there's an emotional counterpiece to it also. So if you choose what it is that you actually want, and you add pleasure into the mix and you don't reduce your food choices.
You're allowed to enjoy
You get to enjoy it. I know.
What?
I know. Write it down. I'm kidding.
I'm not. Write it down.
Yeah. And so what's cool is that when you add pleasure and you get the food that you actually want, you just feel so satisfied, both physically but also emotionally.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I could continue talking to you three for hours and hours, but I know we need to respect your time because we actually snagged them between engagements. But there's so much more that we could talk about. So I'm going to refer our listeners and viewers actually to your books as a good starting place. So like I said, we will link to their works of art and excellence and expertise in our show notes.
And I just want to say thank you to Wendy, Dr. Shelley, Signe for making time to be here and share all of this beautiful experience with our listeners. For show notes, make sure you go to therapistuncut.com. Thank you again for helping us make mental health relatable and a part of your everyday conversation. We will see you on the next episode of Therapists Uncut. See ya.
Thank you for joining Therapists Uncut, a production of AMP Smart Business. To learn more about Therapists Uncut and stay up on upcoming episodes, please subscribe and follow us on social media. As a reminder, although the Therapists Uncut co-hosts are licensed therapists, they are not your therapists. This podcast is not intended to substitute professional mental health counseling. If you need professional therapy, please contact your local provider or primary care provider. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of Therapists Uncut.